So, I'm recording this interview. So, Nick, can you tell us a little bit about your background? Who are you? What do you do? Um,
Sure. Yeah, my name is Nick Hodge. I own a couple of financial publishing companies. One is called Digest Publishing, where we offer different services to subscribers. They can subscribe to various newsletters that cover different facets of the market. My partner, his name is Gerardo Del Real. He covers primarily junior miners. And I'm sort of more agnostic, although I've been investing in the junior mining and resource space for about 10 years. I cover really the entire market from a contrarian value perspective. I like to invest in ETFs with my safe money and then have different services that cover those things. And we also have a crypto service where we've given a crypto trader $50,000 of our own money to let him go and trade. So, and then we own Resource Stock Digest, which is an online media outlet that lets companies tell their story to our retail audience. My partner does interviews and we distribute them and write reports about companies, et cetera. And I've been sort of in the publishing game for going on 20 years now. I started with a different publisher, publishing and researching primarily about clean technology and renewable energy back in 2007, 2008, et cetera. And then we had the market crash, the global financial crisis in 2008. And I saw what gold did after that, going to record prices in 2010 and 2011. And I started learning more about hard assets and monetary policy and things like that. And that's why I sort of gravitated to the hard asset or natural resource space. I like things that you can put in your hands and drop on your foot, as they say.
mhm. So, you have a long history with the commodities markets, right? Which is where MineHUB operates in.
Sure. Yeah, I've actually written a couple of books about energy and investing in energy. So I wrote one called Energy Investing for Dummies. I wrote one called Investing in Renewable Energy. And so, yeah, I definitely have a firm grasp on how the energy markets work and how they've evolved over time, which I think is super important for the MineHUB story.
Okay. So, as I told you, I found you researching about MineHUB. I found a video of yours in a conference, and your speak was great, as I told you.
Thank you.
But I would like to know, how did you first come across MineHUB? How long have you been invested in it? And what gave you conviction in the thesis?
Sure.
What made you decide to go long?
Yeah. Well, having been in the resource space, like I said, for 10 or so years, I've built a deep network of financiers and executives and people who like to invest in natural resources. And one of the companies was called Cucho Copper. And the chairman of Cucho Copper is Vince Sirachi, who is also the chairman of MineHUB. And so after I had gotten to know Vince for a little bit, this is going back, probably 10 years now, he started introducing me to the idea of MineHUB. It was probably around, 2018, 2019. And I didn't invest. I just sort of internalized the idea. And then it was probably 2020, 21 where I started investing. And it was Vince who introduced it to me. And it made all the sense in the world because at least at the time, I was thinking about it more in terms of blockchain and cryptocurrencies. You remember we were having very big runs in Bitcoin, et cetera, in that 2020 timeframe during COVID. And so I was thinking about it almost as a way to invest in the blockchain or to invest in cryptocurrencies through an equity. But, as you probably know, that's not really what MineHUB is. And then I started doing more due diligence and I started reading about the coming regulatory changes. And I knew, this is probably the most important reason why, I knew keenly all the challenges that resource companies face in terms of fraud and manipulation and just general opaqueness, right? It's tough to get information from companies sometime pre-mining when the ore is still in the ground and even, post-mining and refining, where you're seeing these stories of copper getting delivered to the exchange that's not really copper, it's painted rocks or something like that, or the London.
What's happening in this space?
Absolutely. Even going back to Bre-X, which isn't really where MineHub operates. But that was a huge scandal in the 1990s that led to the implementation of the 43101 standards in Canada, where you have to report information and assays in a certain way. And so it became clear to me, especially when I started learning more about the battery passports and the electrification. I mean, there's a million reasons why MineHub makes sense, right? When you look at how cobalt is produced with child labor or the coming ESG rules. And so I like this, a light bulb sort of went off, and I was like, man, mining is an antiquated industry. It really needs to get brought into the 21st century. And so
in your experience, you saw this problem that mining companies and the mining sector is facing, which is they are very old school. You could see that.
Oh, 100%. I mean, things in the mining industry are still done sometimes on spreadsheets and paper and pencil, and you still read cases of people manipulating assays, or as I say, maybe not from the mine, but just look what happened in the London Metals Exchange a couple of years ago, where a big Chinese entity was short so much nickel that they couldn't cover with a physical nickel that they almost brought down the LME, right? The London Metals Exchange. Wow. And so there was a need for transparency and a need for tracking. So whether it's fraud or whether it's ESG or whether it's just a need for transparency, I mean, all those things MineHub helps to solve. And so, and I also like the sort of capital light model, right? When I traditionally invest in resources, these companies are always needing capital, right? Because they're always burning cash to drill and to explore. I like the fact that MineHub could potentially fetch a SaaS sort of multiple, right? A software as a service multiple, as they approach profitability and as they increase the annual recurring revenue, which is a very important component of the MineHub story.
Mm-hmm. Great. So lots of things here. You mentioned the battery passports. Can you comment a bit about the battery passport and about other ESG regulations that are coming in and that are making the lives of these commodities, these mining companies, much harder?
Yeah, absolutely. When you go to buy a car now, I'm not sure how it is in Brazil, but I'm sure it's similar. There's a sticker on the window that tells you the information about the car, how many miles per gallon you're going to get, or miles per liter, perhaps. How much how much you should expect to pay to maintain the car, and other information like that is just on the sticker on the window. But those metrics are sort of different when we start talking about hybrid electric vehicles and electric vehicles, right? Countries, increasingly, the United States, Europe, Japan has already implemented this. They want to know the sourcing of the minerals that went into the battery, and they want to know the scope of the emissions that are associated with them. And so what these countries are starting to require, it's partly required already in the US, with the Inflation Reduction Bill that we passed a couple of years ago, that these minerals that go in these batteries that are going to get tax credits, they have to prove that the minerals came from North American Free Trade Agreement countries. In Japan, they started requiring this data last year, and the European Union will start requiring it in 2027. And it just looks like this. I mean, it looks like a sticker on the window, and it'll say, there's X amount of pounds of lithium in this battery. It was sourced from Australia, and these are the amount of emissions that went along with it. Same with the cobalt, same with the manganese, same with the nickel, etc. And that's great. I'm all for
Canada,
it.
Right?
Excuse me?
Are you in Canada or in the US?
I'm in the US.
These stickers, are they already for real? Are they already happening? That's already a reality.
Yeah, for sure. So not in the US yet, but in Europe, I believe it was Volvo was the first company to make a battery passport, and they're actually digital. So instead of a sticker on the window, there's probably QR code or something you scan, and then the passport comes right up on your phone, and you can see. If you just Google, battery passport and do an image search, you'll be able to see what they look like. And so that I was going to say that's great, but in order to have all that, you need to collect all that data, right? Someone's got to be collecting, analyzing, sorting that data, and making it easy to read. And there's only a couple of companies in the world that can do that, right? And one of them is MineHUB. And so, if you want to track the emissions of nickel mining that goes into batteries, you've got to put all that data into a database somewhere, right? Starting from the mine, how much diesel was burned in the trucks and the loaders and the excavators. I mean, all that stuff has to be tracked. And so, again, MineHUB is one of the few companies that can do that. And what's great, and this is another important point about MineHUB, is that there's so many companies involved that you have to onboard them all to the platform, right? Like your diesel generator provider, your truck provider, your fleet manager, your shipping contractor, your trucking contractor, like all those companies have to come on board. And by default, that inherently means that MineHUB attracts more potential customers to its platform.
And that effect, right?
The network effect, right? Exactly, or the flywheel effect, correct. And we've seen that just by nature of the caliber of clients that MineHUB has been able to onboard. I mean, they're working with the largest copper miner in the world, Codelco, right? And some of the largest wire manufacturers and things like that. So it's a very real outfit. They're working with very real partners. And I expect, as you said, that network effect to just expand it as these laws come in more into effect.
Right. During your research, did you come across any company that can compete with MineHUB, that can be an alternative, or do you think that MineHUB is quite unique in the space?
Yeah, there is another company called Circulor, and I mentioned that Volvo was already doing a battery passport. That's who did it for Volvo. It was a company called Circulor, and the name comes from this is the idea of a circular economy, where we're mining minerals, putting them in batteries, tracking all the input data, emissions data, et cetera, and then recycling them at the end of your life. So it's a circular economy. I don't want to step too far out of bounds, but it would seem to make sense for, at some point, maybe Circular to combine with MineHUB or MineHUB to acquire that company, because there's lots of synergies there. And, MineHUB has already partnered with and merged with other companies, right? I mean, that's how we got the current president and CEO, Andrea Auren-Guren. MineHUB merged with the company that she was running. So I expect there, Waybridge, exactly right. So I expect there to be continued, consolidation or M&A in the space.
I also saw you talking about Abaxx Technologies, which has already 19% of MineHUB. And, well, you were talking now about acquisitions. Maybe Abaxx could acquire MineHUB at some point. I don't know. But could you comment a little on their partnership, on what Abaxx is, and why this partnership might be so important for MineHUB?
Absolutely. Abaxx is working on digitizing commodity trading and commodity contracts. So I already mentioned how the London Metals Exchange was almost taken down because there was a large Chinese trading entity that was short more nickel than physically existed. They couldn't physically cover their short. Abaxx has already launched a physically settlable nickel sulfate contract, right? So this isn't a paper contract. You have to take delivery, right? It's a physical deliverable commodity contract. And
so if I buy this contract, this nickel, this commodity will be delivered for me, right? So I have to find a way so it can be delivered.
Correct, and you have to be able to prove that, right? So how are you going to prove that? Well, you're going to have some data, likely from MineHUB, that shows that you have that security of supply to fulfill that contract. And so they've already done it for nickel. They're doing it for lithium, and as you say, they've already bought 19.9% of MineHUB. So in order to get the data that you need to have those contracts, not just to be able to prove that you have the actual metal, but there's an ESG component to it as well. Like Abaxx wants to have a clean copper contract, for example, because Well, it all relates to the batteries, right? Like if you're going to want a clean battery that has low emission copper, you're going to want a clean copper contract. And so there could be potentially tiers of commodity contracts in the future. Like tier 1 has the lowest emissions, tier 2 has medium emissions, tier 3 has higher emissions, for example. And you'll want the cleanest copper to go into the batteries because you're trying to have the batteries to have the lowest carbon footprint imaginable. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that Abaxx is facilitating via a new commodities exchange based out of Singapore. As I said, they've done it with nickel sulfate, they've done it with lithium, and they just launched a gold contract, I believe, this week or last week. So, and they're gaining traction is an important point. Like Reuters is writing about it. I saw an article about Abaxx in the Financial Times, and the folks behind Abaxx are real players in the commodity markets with roots, deep in Wall Street. Josh Crum, who runs Abaxx, is former Goldman Sachs, and there's some other pretty heavy hitters that are pushing Abaxx forward. And so I agree with you that they could be a potential suitor down the road, and certainly it could attract much more business for MineHUB as they integrate together.
MineHUB is also entering the Chinese market, as far as I can tell. How much are you aware of this movement MineHUB is doing towards the Chinese market?
I mean, I'm aware of it, but I don't have too many insights for you. What I know is that they started to make inroads into relationships in China, and they've started talking about getting into other groups of metals. So primarily right now, MineHUB is operating in sort of the copper space, but they've been talking about getting into iron and steel, and that's a huge market in China. And so I think that's the reason for going into China, is to partner with companies that are doing non-nickel, non-copper, but iron-based, steel-based type contracts. I don't have any more insights for you other than that, but if they're able to penetrate that market, it would be very beneficial for the company, obviously.
Right. One thing that caught my attention when I looked at MineHUB was MineHUB's financials, because MineHUB's revenue, as far as I can remember, is lower than its operating expenses. So the company is now burning cash. The company is not profitable yet. How do you see that? Can you comment a little on that?
Yeah. Since Andrea came on board, she's been saying that once they got to 2 million, 2.5 million in annual recurring revenue, they would be approaching profitability. Like you said, they haven't reached it yet because they've been saying they're making further investments in technology and in adding employees. And so it seems like it's just been kicked down the road a little bit. But, I expect it to be reached this year or next year. And I think that's the thing that's really gonna lift the lid off the share price. I mean, obviously, I was talking about getting a software multiple earlier, a software as a service multiple, something like 20, 25, 30 times revenues, right? That would take the market cap to, I don't know, 60, 75, $100 million. That's sort of double what it is now. And, that's the thesis, right? And the market is sniffing that out. You probably saw earlier this year when we entered the trade wars and MineHUB was putting out press releases that they could be a beneficiary of the trade wars. The share price went to over $1 for a very brief time. It's now settled back down to around 50 cents. But it shows you, one, how the market could value this, and two, how fast that can happen.
Yeah. You just mentioned the trade war. That's a topic that I haven't yet talked about here on Capital Edge Research. Can you comment a bit about how important MineHUB might be with the commercial war in mind?
Absolutely, and I'll give it to you through the lens of maybe the Russia-Ukraine war, right? When that broke out a couple of years ago, and we put many sanctions on Russia. The Western countries, Europe put sanctions on Russia. We disabled their access to the SWIFT banking system. We put embargoes on imports of Russian oil and Russian uranium and things like that. And what did you see happening? Well, they end up, circumventing the sanctions because, they move the oil to a certain location, put it on a different tanker, and all of a sudden, you're buying oil that's Russian, but it's not Russian, right? And so they skirt the sanctions. Just think about that for copper or nickel or iron or something. If we put sanctions on China, or even if we just need to track them for tariff purposes, we need to know, on what materials to put the tariffs on. You need to know where the materials are coming from and be able to track them through the supply chain. And that's the definition of what MineHUB does, right? So if we are going to put tariffs on copper imports, for example, like you'll need to be able to know where they're coming from and have tracked them from the source, and that's obviously a service that MineHUB provides.
Yeah, very interesting. You mentioned a market cap of $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually recording a video about whether MineHUB could reach a $1 billion market cap. And honestly, for me, of course, it's hard to imagine the chart going from the market cap going from where it is today to 1 billion. But stuff like that happens. And I think that MineHUB could be a $1 billion market cap. I've commented that with a friend of mine who doesn't know a lot about the thesis, and he just he looked at the top line and thought that was a crazy assumption. I mean, this company would need to trade at very crazy multiples, and its revenue would need to multiply 1,000 times, so this valuation could become a reasonable reality, right?
It would be a $10 stock, yeah.
Yeah. And what I think is, okay, they have, I think, 2 million in revenue annualized, but I think that the network effect in MineHUB, I mean, they have more than 200 partners on their platform. From what I can tell, from what I know, only around 10 are already paying clients. So you have dozens and dozens and dozens of companies testing this platform that might become clients. So what's the chance of 10 more companies for them to become clients? So what I can see is that this company's revenue might grow at a really incredible pace. My question, after having said all that, is where do you see this company going? Do you have not a price target, but do you have a number in terms of market cap in mind?
I mean, I told you the 100 million market cap already. I think that's a very doable target in the next year or two. Mm-hmm. And just do math. Just take the math that you were talking about, right? They have 200 people on the platform. 10 have converted. What is that? 5%. And so you could get to 10%, 15% penetration. And I wrote the number down because it's important. There's nearly $15 billion in transactions processed annually in 2024 that they've already done. And you're talking about a market that's infinitely bigger than that, right? A $1 trillion commodity market, right? And so the penetration is still low. The miners, the processors are still behind the curve, and there's a lot of penetration to still be had. And as I said, they can grow via M&A as well. And so I wouldn't rule that out of the cards, just bolting on additional revenue. And so, I've seen the long form articles. I forget who was posting them on Twitter a couple of months ago, very, very in-depth research about MineHUB and the potential target. And, I agree that you could get to $1 billion market cap. We'll see if they have to issue more shares. Mm-hmm. Hopefully they don't. I participated in a couple of financings in full disclosure last year and have brought my group of accredited investors into them. So, we don't want to write more checks into the company, right? We want them to get to that self-funding level. But we will, of course, continue to support if they do need a little bit more cash, because we believe that much in the opportunity, and we've already been shareholders for a couple of years.
Yeah. Are you also aware of their partnership with Surecomp?
I'm aware, yes.
Can you comment a little about that?
Yeah, so
And what it might represent in terms of significance for the company?
yeah, so they partnered. I took some notes here with Surecomp last May, so it's been about a year to integrate this platform called Revo. And what it allows companies to do is to monetize commodities that are not stuck, but are in transit, are in the commodity supply chain, but haven't got to final deliverability yet. It gives transparency to creditors, to lenders, to banks, to lower these companies' cost of capital so they could get loans or lines of credit against commodities that haven't reached their final deliverability status yet. And that's important because it lowers the cost of capital for these companies and allows them to monetize in some way assets that they never could before. And so it's a driver for these companies to come to MineHub, because if they could get loans or lines of credit and lower cost of capital, they need to be able to prove to the banks that they have these commodities in the supply chain. And again, that's a service that MineHub can now provide with the Vivo platform. And it's just another driver, right? We talked about fraud, we talked about ESG, we've talked about transparency, and now you have a finance mechanism that could potentially incentivize companies to come to the MineHub platform. So sort of, to do soccer for Brazil, multiple shots on goal, right?
Yeah. You were talking about that, and I was just thinking, man, there are so many problems that this company solves. In my view, they are becoming actually a one-stop shop for commodities companies. So soon, you will come to MineHub, and you will be able to manage all your deliveries, upload all your documents, handle with communications, and now you have the financing part. So I think that they're building a huge moat, very strong competitive advantage, and well, I agree with you. This company can trade at really high multiples, SaaS multiples, right?
Correct.
Well, Nick, I'm out of questions.
Okay.
Do you have something that you find important to add?
No, I just think it's still early days in the story. I think that battery passports are still to come. All the things we talked about are still in the future and are being built. So I think there's a lot of runway ahead. And, I think that what you saw earlier this year in terms of MineHub shares, I think that's just a taste of what's to come. And, I think the wick is getting shorter on the candle. It's been sort of a slow burn. It's been, as I said, I've been following the company for a couple of years, but I think we're getting very, very close to critical mass.
Yeah.
And profitability.
Yeah, agree. Well, Nick, it was a huge pleasure talking to you.
You as well, Victor.
Thank you so much for this interview. I think you helped to add a lot of value. And well, I will reach out to you if I have any additional questions. Well, it was a pleasure. Bye bye.
Victor, it was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.